2023, a new year. We are here to announce that this year, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show is stepping out into the world and stepping up to bring revolution to the people, to put revolution on the map. My name is Andy Z, and I am the host of the show.
And my name is Sunsara Taylor. I am the co-host of the Revolution Nothing Less Show.
This is our 130th episode, our fourth season, and on the Revolution Nothing Less Show, we bring to you the cold reality of what humanity faces, what the people of this country face.
Look at this world. Black and brown youth, gunned down by police, the white supremacy that is built into this system, the oppression and degradation of women and of people based on their gender and sexual orientation built into this system. The demonization, the deportation of millions and millions of immigrants here at the border and all around the world built into this system. The destruction of our planet by the dynamics of capitalism, imperialism, built into this system, and the unending wars of aggression, the war crimes and crimes against humanity built into this system of capitalism, imperialism. This is why Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader that we follow, says, let's get down to basics. We need a revolution. Anything else in the final analysis is bullshit.
On the RNL Show, we bring you the cold reality, as Sunsara said, that this system not only can't be reformed, but it is unnecessary. And we bring you the hot truth that there is a strategy for an actual revolution brought forward by the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, and a vision of a whole radically new society, a better way that we could be living that's concentrated in the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America.
This is a show for the whole world and for a radically new world, and we are inviting and challenging you to get into this revolution with us, Season 4. So with that, let's go!
Once again, welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show. A new year, a new season, and a new set.
And we are set to make a major advance in putting revolution on the map in 2023. In this first episode of the season, we're going to bring you a taste of what you'll get in Season 4 here on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show. And dropping that banner this morning is just a sense of the energy, the spirit, the determination that we are going to bring. The RNL Revolution Nothing Less crew and the Revcoms here in LA pulled that together in less than 24 hours. Up late at night, out early in the morning. We've got what humanity needs, and we are going to bring it.
Sunsara, it felt really fantastic. It felt liberating to start the season by getting out of the studio and putting the new season of the RNL Show before thousands of rush hour Los Angeles drivers. This year, we want to kick out the jams to bring forward a force of people determined to put revolution on the map. And you put it straight out on the street this morning. This system of capitalism, imperialism must go. It is at the root of all the misery, oppression, degradation, destruction that is threatening the very future of humanity with a heightened danger of nuclear war between the US, Russia, or China. And with accelerating climate change caused by this capitalist system threatening the lives of billions, if not all, of humanity. The RNL Show exposes the crimes of this system, and we reveal how all forms of that oppression, all the oppression that confronts people today, is perpetrated and perpetuated by this system. For one example, why do the police murder black and brown youth over and over again, setting a record for police killings in this country in 2022? And here in LA, in just the last week or so, three mentally disturbed people were killed by the police.
You're trying to do it for me. You're trying to do it. Stop it.
And all this is just 2 years after tens of millions took to the streets to protest the police murder after they choked the life out of George Floyd. Why? Because this system has no future for these youth. No jobs, no way to survive in a society whose fabric is woven through and through with white supremacy. These pigs brutalize, frame up, and lock in prisons millions of our youth, depriving them of their lives and humanity, of their creativity. A creativity and an energy that only a radically different and far better society that is brought into being through a real revolution could unlock. This system has no future for the youth, but the revolution does. That's what we bring every week, and why thousands of youth need to be watching this show to get their heads out of all the bullshit, attacking and canceling each other, whether IRL or online. On the RNL Show, we are going to struggle with all the bullshit system think that's out there, all the woke nonsense, and even worse, that turns people against each other, hustling for a little piece of the imperialist pie, instead of uniting to fight the power and transform the people for revolution. Fighting the power and transforming the people for revolution is a key part of the strategy for revolution. And that, too, will be a big part of our new season. Revolution, nothing else or nothing less, is what we need.
As part of this strategy, we don't just bring out the horror and the nightmare of the world the way it is today. We bring alive the way out of this madness and the possibility of making a real revolution and a whole better way that society and the world could be organized. In season 4 of the RNL Show, we're going to bring alive and get much more into this radical, liberating document, the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. This is a concrete and visionary blueprint for a radically new way society could be organized, where humanity could actually thrive, a society that is working to spread revolution around the world and put all of humanity on the road to real emancipation. This Constitution was written by Bob Avakian, the most radical revolutionary leader and thinker on the planet today, the revolutionary leader that we here on the RNL Show follow, and the leader you need to follow if you want to get humanity free. So getting into this, lifting people's sights to a whole different way the world could be, will be a very inspiring, liberating, and fun part of this season, season 4.
Yeah, and this is not some pipe dream. Because we're in a rare situation in this country where there is more possibility for a successful revolution than ordinarily exists. Over the last 18 months, we have brought out the analysis from Bob Avakian that this situation exists because, and I'm going to quote here, these divisions among the ruling powers and in the larger society cannot be resolved within the framework that has existed and has held things together for nearly 150 years, since shortly after the end of the Civil War, which led to the abolition of slavery. They cannot be resolved on the basis of the capitalist democracy that has been the normal means of capitalist rule, which is in reality a dictatorship for so long. Look, something radically different is going to replace the framework that has existed for all this time. And as a document put out by the Revcoms in late 2021, a declaration and call to get organized now for a real revolution that's available on our website, revcom.us, sharply points out, quote, "The crisis and deep divisions in society now can only be resolved through radical means of one kind or another, either radically reactionary, murderously oppressive, and destructive means, or radically emancipatory, revolutionary means," end quote. And for that second resolution to be real, we have to change the equation by bringing forward thousands of people to become an organized force for revolution now. We need to be changing this situation where people's sights, where all people see, are the alternatives of the two ruling class parties who run this system today. People's sense of the possible is confined to the horrific choice between the fascist Republican Party with their rabid base on the one hand, or on the other, the Democrats who have no answers. When the Democrats are not openly conciliating and collaborating with the Republican fascists, they are compelled by the fact that they are a ruling class party to enforce that same system, doing many of the same oppressive things in essence as the Republicans, yet covered over with some sweet talk or minor adjustments. 2 examples. The Democrats would not and did not mobilize masses of people to fight like hell to preserve the right to abortion. And right now, they are unleashing even more terror and misery on the border, dramatically increasing the expulsions of migrants seeking asylum at the U.S. border with Mexico. And let's not forget that it is Biden and the Democrats who right now are ratcheting up the Ukraine war against Russia, using the people of Ukraine as cannon fodder and threatening the people of the world.
This is a situation that is going to lead to big questioning about the way things have been, why they are this way, and what can be done to radically change them. And this situation that Andy is describing, this rare time when revolution is more possible, this is an analysis that was made by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian. And here we want to say a few words about this leader. First off, he became a revolutionary in the 1960s, and he has been working on revolution ever since then. When so many other people gave up, fell away, when revolutions were defeated and turned back, Bob Avakian not only persisted, but he went to work to develop and advance the theory, the strategy, the scientific method and approach. He developed a new communism so we can make a real revolution in the world today and really bring about the emancipation of all of humanity. And one of the hallmarks, one of the most important parts of this new communism he has forged is that this is a revolution that is not about revenge. It's not about those who are on the bottom getting on the top. This is a revolution that is to end all forms of exploitation, all forms of oppression, to really put an end to all forms of division, antagonistic divisions among the people, and bring about real emancipation for all of humanity. This is a leader you get to know on this show. Now, last year, Andy and I had the opportunity to sit down with Bob Avakian, to do a major interview with him, a very unique experience. And we got to interview him in 3 different sessions. He was very generous with his time. We got to interview him up close and personal. And through these interviews, you get a sense of his heart and soul, his hardcore commitment to a real revolution. You get to understand the world in a whole radically different way. And this is one of the most important places to go, to get the answers that you need, to get the method to understand the world that you need to be able to contribute to this revolution in this rare time.
There's nothing like these interviews. They're very rare. They're very unique, and they're very decisive at this time. He puts the whole thing out there, the situation we face, the ideas that are holding people back, how we could actually make a revolution, what this revolution has to be for, what's the morality we need to get to a society that people would actually want to live in and where they would flourish. And as Sunsara said, they're up close and personal. Because when you take the measure of the person, you take a measure of the revolution that they are leading. If people saw these interviews, and our initial experience of the thousands who have seen them so far, is that this could be a game changer. Getting into these interviews is a key way right now of preparing for an actual revolution, of bringing forward people from all different strata, but especially from the social base, and especially from the youth, but everybody who has a heart for humanity. Get into these interviews, and you can't just watch them once. I've seen them many times, as well as conducting the interviews, and every time I understand more about what is possible and how we could really be different. This is a decisive part right now of preparing for revolution. And I'm asking you now to not only watch these yourselves more than once, but to spread these. We need to make a revolution. We need tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people watching these interviews. And we need your creativity, your ideas, and your actual work to spread these far and wide. And we're going to be featuring this on the show. You go on our YouTube channel, you can watch each interview. Each one has an arc within it, and all 3 have an arc as a whole, and we have individual segments. All of these are tremendous liberating tools. And, I was talking to some other older comrades, and we were talking about how back in the day, we would listen over and over again to the speeches of Malcolm X. That's what you need to do with this, because this is about the revolution for our time, for this time, and for the future.
So a little later in our show, we're going to have a segment from Rafael Kadaris, one of our correspondents, on internationalism. We're going to bring you a special highlight from the artist and musician Arturo O'Farrill, who was in conversation with Andy about the artistic spirit and the revolution, and the interviews from Bob Avakian. We're going to bring a segment on the liberation of women and the concentrated fight around abortion. But first, to kick off this episode, we want to bring you an excerpt from this interview with Bob Avakian, where Andy put to him one of the big questions that people come up against when they learn about this revolution. And they're inspired, and they want to see this revolution happen, but they see how small the forces of revolution are. Could we really do this?
with such few forces? How could we succeed? Let's watch it.
So just to follow up on that last point you made, and some of the people who have been active going out to organize people with that understanding have raised to us that, but the people say to us, they look out there and they say, you people don't have that many people right now, you're kind of small, and not only that, there's not really the kind of mass resistance we need, and so how are you going to do that? What you're talking about sounds good, but it ain't going to happen. What do you say to them?
Yeah, well, a lot of times it looks like something's not going to happen until the night before it does happen. That's one thing to understand, and that has meaning. It's not just a clever thing to say. This is a time of, when things are being accelerated at an increasing pace, and changes. I mean, who anticipated a year ago even that they would overturn Roe v. Wade? A lot of people are saying, the Supreme Court's bad, but they'll never do that. I've read many articles where people were writing and saying they'll never do that because most people in the country support the right to, at least the right to choose. Well, guess what? They did it. Things of that kind are going to continue to happen at an accelerated pace. And, so yes, it's true. The forces of revolution, in particular the Revcoms who base themselves on the new communism, are very small at this time. That's a fact, and we're not gonna try to bullshit people and pretend something other than what it is, because we base ourselves on a scientific approach to making revolution, which means actually dealing with the actual reality and telling people the truth about the actual reality. I've told this story before. There was a group. I don't know if they're still around or not, but back in the 60s, there was this group called PL, Progressive Labor. I mean, you can imagine, they were supposedly a communist group. Imagine what kind of communism, what kind of group supposed to be communist calls itself Progressive Labor? I mean, come on. Anyway.
Wrong on two counts.
Leaving that aside, like in the economism to the nth degree, just like burying yourself in the narrow struggles, of today. But anyway, one of their members got up at a rally, and I think it was actually they were being interviewed too. And I think it actually got into the New York Times, where they said, "We have 10,000 members in Harlem." And a bunch of us said, "Man, what the fuck are you talking about? You don't have any fucking 10,000 members in Harlem." And the guy said, "Yeah, I know we don't, but if we say it, maybe we'll get them." Well, that's not the way we're going to approach things with that kind of opportunism. You have to deal with the actual reality. So yes, the forces of revolution are small. Right now, the Revcom forces, basing themselves on the scientific method and approach of the new communism, are small. And, if it were just a matter of like gradually accumulating forces, a few today and a few next week and a few next year, and, with the prospect that maybe in some, never land of 70 years from now, maybe we'd have enough people to make a revolution. Well, yes, then you could say that would never happen. But look, I made this point in 2020 when there was a massive upsurge around the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I said, look around you. Nobody expected this kind of massive outpouring. And yet, here it came seemingly out of nowhere. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the underlying contradictions. The oppression of black people in particular, and others, Latinos, Native Americans, and the brutal way in which this is daily enforced by murdering pigs. This was an underlying accumulation of contradictions and, and suffering and anguish and outrage finally burst forth when this was just one too many. It's similar to what's happening in Iran now. There have been many women dragged off the street by the morality police for years and decades. But finally, this one, with its particularly brutal murder of this, yes, that's what it was. The idea of this 22-year-old woman who was perfectly healthy had a heart attack is outrageous, and nobody believes it. Not even the people telling a lie believe it, I would imagine. Okay, but all of a sudden, things have reached another level. Now, I don't know where all this is going to go at this time. The forces of the ruling class there are still very powerful, but this has gone to a level beyond anything previously. And it's, on the one hand, you could say it's just one more thing. Here's one more woman dragged off by the morality police and brutalized, and it results in her death. But it was just one too many. in the context of a lot of other things going on. You know, people are suffering economically and so on. It was just one too many. The same thing in 2020. There were millions of people in the street. What was missing then, and we have to fault ourselves in part for this, although we talked about revolution and put out revolution, we didn't really go and struggle with people about, you know, what this really shows is the need to get rid of the whole system. And you are not going to defund the police. You know, look at what's happened. You know, you got, the great Democratic hero, Joe Biden. The answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund them, fund them, fund them. What'd I say? Fund them. But that was a prevailing line. And so, this thing got led off into a side stream and a side street and didn't go anywhere ultimately, even though it was, really heroic outpouring of millions of people, which was supported by millions more around the world. Who predicted that a month before? I mean, yes, we've been talking for decades and mobilizing people in struggle against police murder for decades. There's a whole national day of protest against police brutality and criminalization of a generation and repression. That goes back to the mid-90s. But all of a sudden, a bunch of things came together. All right, if the revolutionaries had been working the way we should have been, bringing revolution to that and struggling with people, not just about we need revolution in the abstract, but why these other avenues and lines and roads and programs were not going to lead things where they need to go. The question is, why should anybody put up with this kind of brutal murder time after time after time after time? Why do the parents and loved ones of these people have to shed these tears and cry this anguish time after time after time? Isn't it long past time to put an end to this completely?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what is going to be required to put an end to this and all the other outrages, which we also need to be bringing sharply to light? The oppression of women, the absolute destruction of the environment, the threat of nuclear war going on, the persecution of the immigrants, and on and on and on. The persecution of gay people and, trans people and so on. In the context of all that, we needed to be saying to people, there's only one solution to this. It's not an easy solution, but it's the only real solution. That's what a scientific approach tells us, because this is rooted in the system and we can show it. And the only way to get rid of all this is to overthrow this system. Now, that probably would not have led to a revolution right then, but it could have led to accumulating many more forces. And then the next time something jumped off, like what happened with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we'd be in a stronger position with more forces and more ability to impact that situation, so long as we were consistently going out there with revolution. And Lenin made the point, leader of the Russian Revolution and important communist theoretician, made the point that in these kind of circumstances, which we're living in now, and it's important to understand, decades of ordinary times get concentrated in not only in years, but in months and weeks. And that's what you saw in 2020 on a certain level, not yet to revolution, but that's what you saw, and that's what's going to be increasingly happening. The question is, are the revolutionaries, small as they are right now? Yes, we're going to be honest about this. We're not going to try to fool people. That's not scientific. That's not principled. But small as they are, can they go out and drive home to people this lesson and show it in a scientifically grounded, understandable way, not talking like, well, you must understand it's the imperialist system that causes all these horrors in the world, and the first thing we need is a proletarian revolution, which first occurred in 1917 after the failure of the Paris Commune in 1871, and was taken to its highest level by the Chinese Cultural Revolution. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? But to go out and in a living way present to people the actual reality of what this is all rooted in, why things are accelerating the way they are, how the ruling class is increasingly in an antagonistic, unresolvable conflict within itself, and how this provides opening for us to actually get rid of all this oppression by scientifically understanding that it's rooted in the very workings of this system, the very dynamics and the very relations of this system, and that we can mobilize and win over the forces, most of all people who are catching the worst hell under this system, which are millions and tens of millions, but also people from other parts of society who hate injustice and who want a better future for humanity and don't want to have nuclear weapons raining down on humanity, don't want the environment to be destroyed. We can win increasing numbers of them over, and it's going to all be very accelerated one way or the other. So we've got to go out with that understanding and give that understanding to the masses of people, like I said, in very basic terms and in everyday language, not in a stilted language that I was just, mocking, to be blunt. But, this is where building up the forces for revolution in a growing way. Today there are small numbers. Tomorrow there are, hundreds verging on thousands. And there are thousands. And when there are thousands, those thousands make millions sit up and take notice. You see thousands of people all together, firmly convinced of the need for revolution, not in some sort of religious sense, but with a scientific foundation in basic terms. You see them on the political stage, influencing the political terrain, how things are shaping up. Millions of people start taking notice. And millions of people who are telling us today, oh, that'll never happen, start thinking a little differently, or at least questioning, well, maybe it could happen. And then, the question is, do you have a leading force, a core leading this, that has the scientific method and approach and has an actual strategy and plan for how to build up the forces for revolution, how to work to create the conditions for revolution, carry out what we call the three prepares. Prepare the ground, the political situation, prepare the masses of people, and prepare the vanguard leadership so that you can go all the way with revolution. And people are going to start sitting up and taking notice. Wow, there are people out here and they're very serious about this, and they have a scientific approach which they can explain to me in terms that I can actually understand, and they've got a strategy and a program for how to go about this and how to win when the time comes. Not that they've given us a guarantee, but they have a strategy for how to go about winning, and they've got a whole vision and concrete blueprint for what to do when we do win, namely the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America.
A major theme of this season of the RNL Show will be over the battle for the future of women, whether women will be further enslaved and degraded or emancipated. And this is a crucial fault line in the larger fight for a real revolution and the emancipation of humanity.
Sunsara, as a part of this, we're going to bring an interview to our audience that you did with Merle Hoffman that zeroes in on the fight for abortion rights. But first, we want to share and reflect a little bit on a short excerpt from the interviews that we spoke of earlier that we did with Bob Avakian on this question that sets the right context for why we're going to be taking up the fight for the liberation of women as a core part of the emancipation of humanity this season on the RNL Show. So let's watch this interview with Bob Avakian.
I will say, just on a personal note, that for me, in my own development as a revolutionary and communist, I would say it has been a lifelong process of a continually deepening understanding of the horrific nature of the oppression of women, but also the pivotal and central role of the struggle for the emancipation of women in the overall communist revolution to emancipate all humanity from every form of oppression and exploitation. So, this really is, crucial in the whole struggle. There is not going to be any liberating struggle, any liberating real revolution that doesn't have right at the heart of it, at the core of it, the emancipation of women from every way in which they're degraded and debased and oppressed and, violently suppressed. And, this is a lot of struggle. Now, look, I talked about backward shit that people are into, but there also are, positive things where, not only among young women, but even some of the young men, including among the oppressed, have taken a better stand on this because they can identify, at least on as a first step, beginning basis, they can identify with people who are being oppressed, and then sometimes it's there's more largeness of mind involved. They don't want oppression of any kind, as much as they understand that. They're against it. So there's contention out there. But, in order, like I said, in order to have this revolution, this has to be at the core of it. It's not the only form of oppression. It has to be uprooted, obviously, but it is right at the core of transforming the whole world. This historic and, thousands of year old oppression of women in different forms in different societies. And it's been completely bound up with the division of society overall into masters and slaves, into oppressors and oppressors, exploiters and exploiters. You go back in history, it's completely bound up with that and has run through every form of oppression and exploitation, going back to days of slavery right up to the modern capitalism, imperialism, and all its forms of oppression.
Sunsara, so why don't you react to that clip and the centrality of the oppression of women and the liberation of women to the emancipation of all humanity?
Well, Andy, watching that, there are two really big things that struck me, that stood out to me. And the first is really the character of the revolution that Bob Avakian is fighting for. This is not a revolution to give people more stuff, just a few reforms within this system. As he was talking about, this is a truly radical, emancipating revolution that's about uprooting thousands and thousands of years of oppression and degradation, including the oppression of women by men, which has just been a brutal reality. For generations and generations, women treated as less than human, property of men, being degraded, abused, violated, treated as less intelligent in so many ways. And this has been internalized, not only by women, but by men who are taught and trained to act this oppression out. So this revolution is about breaking down, as he said, all forms of exploitation and oppression, all forms of degradation, including on the most intimate level, the way that women are treated, gender, sexual relations, as well as in the most macro level. And I just think this is a profoundly radical, emancipating revolution. And the second thing that really strikes me listening to that is where he began in that clip, where he says this has been a lifelong journey for him, a continually deepening process of learning about this oppression and about the centrality of the fight for the liberation of women to this revolution. And that says a lot about Bob Avakian, the person and the revolutionary leader, because he has broken new ground on this. For humanity, in the communist revolution, he's not just built on and continued a liberating tradition, which he has, but he's taken it further and ruptured in important ways with the best of the understanding of revolutionaries, of communists, of anybody, on the emancipation of women. And this is something I think we all need to learn from and will be bringing alive in this season.
Yeah, so it's really important for people to see the full answer that this little clip was taken from, and to go to revcom.us and look up what Bob Avakian has written on the question of the liberation of women and its relationship to the emancipation of humanity. It is path-breaking, as you said, and we'll be getting into it more as the season goes on. So let's go to the interview you did with Merle Hoffman.
Merle Hoffman is the CEO and founder of Choices Women's Medical Center in Queens, New York. She is also a longtime fighter for women's reproductive rights. I consider her a very good friend, and we worked very closely together over the last year as co-initiators of Rise Up for Abortion Rights, uniting people from very diverse perspectives to get out in the streets, to raise bloody hell, to stop the Supreme Court from overturning women's right to abortion. Merle Hoffman, welcome back to the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Very glad to be with you, Sunsara. Very glad to be. But you have forgotten one thing that you should introduce me as a second-class citizen, because I am a second-class citizen in this country as a woman who has just recently had a fundamental human, civil, moral right ripped away from me by this fascist Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And that actually gets to the first thing I wanted to ask about.
Right.
In just a few days, January 22nd will be the 50th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision in 1973, Roe v. Wade, which first established the constitutional right for women to have an abortion across the country. And what does it mean? You already began, but what does it mean now that this has been taken away?
You know, I think it's now 24 states that have either totally banned or on the road to ban legal, safe abortion. And some of them are looking to criminalize it, not only the physicians, but now for the women and anybody who helps. And this right allows women to plan their pregnancies, to have that moral agency to make that decision whether or not they're capable within their families, economically, whatever the reasons are, to bring another child into their family. So this allows them to make the decision.
Yeah, these days you hear a lot of good news proclaimed by so-called leaders of the so-called reproductive rights movement and by Democratic Party strategists, and saying, oh, well, now we can just take the abortion fight to the state. We can, state by state, try to win abortion rights. Never mind, 1/3 of the states have already criminalized abortion, as you said, or banned it in various forms.
Right.
But you had a very important objection to this.
Yes, it's absolutely important. I want people to think about the right, let's say the right to free speech, that you have it in New York, but this is now a states' rights issue. When you travel to New Jersey, and you want to say, I think this Democratic Party is sucks, or whatever you want. And, oh, you can't say that, because if you say anything disparaging about the government in New Jersey, you're going to have to pay a price or a fine or go to, I want you to think about the right to go to wherever you want to worship and not being able to do that in Dakota if you try. This is what it is. So it can't be. There are transcendent rights that have to become above and beyond states and even countries. I mean, so this is a firm belief of mine. And the fact that, there's good news, yes, 5 referendums passed. That's great. But what you're doing is normalizing the fact that this is now a states' rights issue. But the point is that we can't lose. This is what Rise Up has been pointing out continually. You can't lose sight of the goal, which is that this must be a federal law or written in some way in the blood of all the women who died for this.
You've made the point that abortion is the front line and the bottom line of women's fight for liberation. And you've called the forces attacking abortion the American Taliban. And I think it maybe would be worth it for you to talk about the level of hatred and terror against women that is actually driving this, because I think that gets obscured.
I think it does too. Now, what connects the Taliban, who, as we know, are the most observably and functionally misogynistic power structure on this planet? What connects those with what's going on in this country? And I would say it is this fundamental misogyny. There is really a backlash against what's happened in the last 50 years, where we see women have come into this society in a far stronger way, in more numbers, in terms of being in the professions, being able to express their talents, being able to choose to engage in society. And this is going to push us, which is what I think they wanted, way back. I mean, when you're pregnant and you don't want to have a child and you're forced to have that child, I can't think of anything worse. I mean, you become a bond slave. It's like an animal that's being bred.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, that there was tremendous struggle by women, by other sections of people in the 60s and the 70s that were part of the atmosphere that led to the winning of abortion rights in the first place, and the shattering of the shame that hung over women's sexuality, their lives, their bodies.
Right. Absolutely.
And today people think about supporting pro-choice. For so many people, the farthest limits of their imagination is donating to the Democrats and voting. And I think it'd be helpful to talk some about Rise Up for Abortion Rights. We initiated this together, coming from very different perspectives. People need to struggle. We need resistance. We need a fight. We need to get out of our comfort zone. How do you see the role of that?
Yeah. First of all, and this is really important, we have to fight against, number one, the need for safety. There's a whole philosophy out there that everything has to be in a safe space. People can't be challenged. They have to feel comfortable if they're in a dialogue, if they're in a classroom and somebody might trigger them. I say lean into your trigger. This is not a safe world. It is definitely not safe for women and girls. We're not living in a safe world. So I think we have to face that. We have to look at reality, the narratives that have gone on from the anti-choice people and our opposition for more than half a century, that you're a slut, you're a whore, you're stupid, you're killing your baby. I mean, I don't say you have to say, I'm proud, but every time I speak, and I'll say it again, I had an abortion. It is important that we come out of the abortion closet. What we did with RU and Rise Up, I think, was really a major catalyst and inspirational action. I mean, we got students out. They were walking out of classes. I remember 15-year-olds that never did anything political, that took a microphone and were up there making speeches. I was extremely moved. And then the older women, I mean, we had shared, that platform on one of the rallies. And I remember the older woman who came up with tears to that young woman and said, "I'm so sorry we couldn't keep this for you." So there's all of this rage, you see, and anger and feeling, how could they do that? How do you take that and say, lean into the rage? Don't be afraid. Use that anger because it's a righteous anger. And that's a whole cultural change, Sunsara.
Merle Hoffman, I want to thank you for coming here on the
Thank
Revolution
you.
Nothing Less show, kicking off season 4 with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
On January 8th, the Revcoms did a live stream to raise money for the movement for an actual revolution, for the work that we're doing here in Los Angeles, including for this show. And in that live stream, I had a brief conversation with the jazz musician and jazz conductor and leader, Arturo O'Farrill, because and we talked about his response to the BA interviews that we've been speaking about today and why he's urging others and himself to support this movement, why it matters. For those of you who don't know who Arturo O'Farrill is, I explained this in the interview, but we're not going to show that part of it. Arturo O'Farrill is the director of the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra and the Latin Jazz Alliance in New York City. This is the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra is keeping alive both the traditional Afro-Latin music, but also new music and music of the whole world. Arturo is a multiple Grammy Award winner, and he's worked with some of the greats in jazz. You can watch the live stream to find out the full bio that I gave. But we thought that this would be showing a bit of this interview, or really most of it, would be fitting for this first show of our new season, because an important part of the RNL show and of Bob Avakian's approach to leadership and to the kind of revolutionary movement we need today in the society we are fighting for has to involve the poetic spirit that embodies the lives, the hopes, the dreams of the people all over the world, art that kindles and feeds the need for people to be amazed. And we wanted to show this interview because of the depth of Arturo's response to the BA interviews, and because for all of you, for our audience, and for ourselves, learning about different spheres of human experience and creativity and their relation to the revolution and the new society we need is part of the mission of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. I spoke of Arturo's global approach to jazz and to music overall, and in particular I spoke about a work, Fandango at the Wall, which is something he did a couple of years ago on the border situation, where he brought together musicians from around the world, from the Mideast and all over, to perform a piece that he wrote on both sides of the wall dividing Mexico from the U.S. And a film was made of this that you can find online at the website Fandango at the Wall. And the point is that this really highlighted the internationalist and activist approach that Arturo takes to music, but in a way that really creates tremendous beauty and tremendous feeling. So with this, I want to go right to the interview, and you'll see what I'm talking about. More recently, I heard that you were able to watch the interviews with Bob Avakian and were inspired to say, okay, I will come on your live stream. Even though we do want to get you on the RNL show, okay? This is sort of the same thing. But right now, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what inspired you in terms of your music and what you do with your life's work to when you saw these interviews by Bob Avakian, particularly that first one, the importance of the poetic spirit, and all this kind of stuff that has brought you here, that we're sitting on a chilly rehearsal stage.
It's funny because I am a Mexican. I was born in Mexico, of Mexican and Cuban heritage. And at the beginning of my life, all I wanted to do was be a great musician and play my art. And I found that wasn't enough, that the happiness, the soul contentment that I had didn't come from playing the piano or being good at something. In fact, I really didn't become somebody in some ways until I started connecting my art with my convictions. Very, very early on, I realized that I think during the Giuliani years, I wrote a piece called The Offense of the Drum, about how Rudolph Giuliani was confiscating drums and arresting drummers who were making too much noise for the gentrification people. I mean, the arresting drummers, that just woke something up in me. And then the murder of Marley Graham, a young man in the Bronx, by the NYPD, that radicalized me. And I think I actually first met you when we were doing a benefit for Russell Maroon shows. And I think, so my life is about three things: deconstructing elitism in the arts. The arts is used, believe it or not, as a way to keep socioeconomic powerful groups in power, and disassociating those with less money. I'm an artist. I'm a pianist. Sometimes people can't afford to come see me play. That pisses me off. The arts is a service to humanity. And I really believe that we build these fancy buildings, we build these temples into sacred art and put it behind glass walls, and nothing could be more anathema to art. Art is service to humanity, to global humanity. And so that's one of the things that has really, really, really governed my thinking, my love. I also really believe that this is a horrifying moral abyss that we live in. This is the imperial terrorism of the United States. What we've done to the world, what we've done to Latin America, what we've done to the Middle East, what we will not take accountability for, and we insist on continuing this horrifying debacle. The predatory death throes of capitalism are getting worse and worse and worse. And I just don't believe that it has to be that way. And so I've dedicated my life to speaking clearly. I have a platform. It's a little platform. I'm a jazz musician, so it's not much of a platform. But as long as I have a platform, I'll use that platform to share what I think is truth journalism. But that musicians, global artists, have the responsibility of being journalists and reporting on what they see in life today. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had people stand up in my show and scream at me because I speak about reproductive rights, or because I speak about global justice, or I speak about socioeconomic terrorism, as if artists do not have that responsibility. Well, let me tell you something. Charles Mingus, Fables of Faubus, John Coltrane, Dizzy Gillespie, Wynton Marsalis, we've been writing about politics and screaming about politics and screaming about justice for as long as there has been jazz. And so I had the privilege of being on the host committee for the first time I saw Bob Avakian in Cornell West. And, it's really funny because that was when I got the idea to do the Cornell West concerto, because I saw Cornell and he reminded me of John Coltrane. So I said, I have to write a concerto for this man. But I remember seeing Bob Avakian and really kind of being amazed by his intellect and his humanity. But it was on the show, it was in the interview that I really felt the humanity of Bob Avakian. And that's like important to me, because I feel the same way about Cornell as I feel about you, as I feel about Carl Dix and so many of my brethren in this movement. They're human beings, man. We're human. We are people who were brought home, swaddled in some sort of clothing. We were raised, we've gone to high school, we've lived lives, we've seen firsthand what humanity does to humanity, what horrors we can do to one another. And I just believe the unexamined life is not worth living. I feel people like Bob Avakian, Cornell West, Andy Sunsara Taylor, these are people who examine their lives and examine their conscience, and they act accordingly. And so I am not content to be just a musician, just a composer, just a jazz pianist. Everything I do is in service to people and to my community and to the people that I don't even know. As far as and the idea by the other thing you mentioned is globality. Oh, jazz is not nationalism. They'd like to pretend that it was born here, that it was designed here, and its best practitioners are here. No, it's the debacle. It's the horror. Jazz was born out of a horrifying reality called the African diaspora, the African slave trade. That jazz is African. So is Latin music. So is soul. So is hip hop. It is music born out of African rhythms. And every time we listen to jazz, every time we listen to hip hop, every time we listen to salsa, we need to remember the story. We need to remember that the peoples were brought here against their will. And so for me, it is national. Jazz is not nationalism. Jazz is global. Jazz, the same African diaspora that landed in New Orleans landed in Caracas and in Havana and in Mexico and Veracruz. And so this gift of love that we receive from the African peoples for a horrifying ordeal, that is truly part of the story and it can never be forgotten. So I've dedicated my life. And the words Afro and Latin and jazz are all just entry points. They're all entry points into what we are. We are a global people. We are a global people. And we need to remember that just as the pandemic showed us, we live and die together.
Well, that was, I think it does capture a good deal of the kind of humanity that is concentrated in these interviews and what we're trying to bring to people. You mentioned that this is a gift to the people of the world, the music. Okay, one of the things that you do is raise an awful lot of money so that I mentioned that we took the entire Revolution tour to Symphony Space. One reason we're able to do such a thing is that you raise a lot of money to subsidize those tickets so that anybody, or not anybody, but that people can afford it. We're trying to raise an awful lot of money here to be able to continue to do the work that we're doing. But even more important right at this moment is to get these interviews out there, because when you speak of the humanity that you experienced, even having read and watched Bob Avakian and people like myself who follow it and spoken at Revolution Books, performed at Revolution Books, there was something in there that was captured. And I think it's important that we're trying right now. I don't know exactly where we're at. I think we're maybe 60% of the way there to today's goal. I've been tuning in and out while traveling over to the theater. I wonder if you could speak.
I would be happy to. I'd be happy to exhort anyone within earshot, and even I will transmit this through extrasensory perception. This is no joke. Revolutionary Bookstore, RNL, Bob Avakian, these are things that there's nowhere else you're going to get this information. There's nowhere else you're going to be radicalized, revolutionized, turned into a truth teller. And if you don't support the incredibly important role of truth telling, that, this is stuff that's so important. Where else are you going to get these books? Where else are you going to see these interviews? Where else are you going to learn about the history, the true history of the United States and what we've done to other people? So it's super important. And I'm going to personally donate, and I think I'm going to encourage others to take out your checkbooks, your credit cards, your Zells, your PayPals, your whatever you use. Turn it in the direction of these folks. Super important. I really, really can't state that enough.
Well, I think
Venmos. I think those people that you spoke of, they all were revolutionary artists speaking truth to power. And I remember sitting backstage with Cornel West at the Apollo and talking about where our jazz leaders are today. And we kind of looked at each other in a very, very, very golden moment and said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that sting.
Beautiful, beautiful.
All right. Now, you guys say one more thing. All you people who heard that, now's the time to take out that checkbook. And the final segment of today's show, which we think is appropriate and necessary in ending this first show of the new season, is on internationalism. And it's going to be hosted by Rafael Kadaris, a regular correspondent and member of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less team.
Internationalism. The whole world comes first. This quote from Bob Avakian is simple and basic, but it is radically different from how most people think and act, especially in this parasitic imperialist country that exploits and feasts on the rest of the world. Just think about it. How many people aren't even paying attention to the rest of the world, while they dress themselves in clothes made in Bangladeshi sweatshops and play around on smartphones which couldn't exist without child labor in the Congo? How many Americans don't even know where countries like Yemen are? A country that their government has been starving and destroying. The point is not to stop wearing clothes and become a geography expert, but what are you thinking about? And who are you thinking about? Are you really thinking about humanity? Or is your mind trapped in the divisions this system imposes on us? My country, my people, or maybe it's just me against the world. And it's not just the America First fascists either. How many times do you hear liberals and progressives talking about our country, our military, our troops? These are not our troops. These are their troops, doing the same thing around the world that the police are doing here, terrorizing and murdering people in the service of the capitalist imperialist system and its ruling class. Our interests are with the people of the world and rising up to overthrow this system and its rulers. And until you realize that, you will be used as a tool of this system and an accomplice to its crimes. Listen to this from Bob Avakian.
You're never going to bring about any kind of fundamental change, and certainly you're not going to bring about a revolution when people are still pledging their allegiance in whatever way to this whole imperialist system, and the dominant imperialists in the world, namely the U.S., which wreaks tremendous havoc on people all over the world, causing tremendous suffering as well as being the major destroyer of the environment. And unless people break with that, no kind of really positive change, and certainly not any fundamental revolutionary change, can possibly take place, And
on this show, we're fighting to break people from American chauvinism and bring forward a revolutionary force of people fighting to free the whole world from this capitalist imperialist system and emancipate all of humanity. We'll be getting into this in many different ways in Season 4. Now, let's look at current events, not from the perspective of ignorant and patriotic Americans, but from the perspective of internationalist revolutionaries.
Turning now to Ukraine.
Tonight, for the first time in this war, Ukrainian soldiers will be sent to be trained on American soil.
May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini.
The House has approved a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine.
We want to see Russia weakened.
Russia's annexation of occupied territory in Ukraine.
Armageddon, nuclear Armageddon.
Armageddon, nuclear war.
Это не блеф.
Every day, we're told about how horrible Putin is and the war crimes he's committing, and he is horrible, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a crime. But how often do they tell you about the much greater war crimes of the US? This is a country that dropped atomic bombs on 2 Japanese cities, a country that has intervened militarily in Latin America over 100 times. This country has never been and can never be a force for good in the world. But every day they tell you that the US is backing the Ukrainians as part of a worldwide fight for democracy against autocracy. Bullshit. The US is using Ukrainians as pawns and cannon fodder to fight a proxy war against its imperialist rivals. And as horrific as this has been already, We also face a threat of the US and Russia provoking each other into a direct conflict, even nuclear war.
All this ridiculous stuff, people sticking their heads down or, I stay in my own lane. You think if there's a nuclear war, it won't touch your lane? I mean, come on, let's get fucking serious around here. You think if U.S. and China go to war, your lane is going to be somehow, I'm just going along in my lane. I mean, people need to wake up and get serious. This is a contest between oppressors, the world's leading oppressors, with the U.S. number one. Yes, USA number one oppressor and plunderer in the entire world for decades. It was always terrible that these are the people ruling the world, but it's now acutely posed. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to determine the destiny of humanity. They need to be overthrown as quickly as possible.
Now, let's turn to Iran, where for over 17 weeks, people have heroically stood up against the Islamic Republic's medieval oppression of women with incredible courage, creativity, and determination in the face of this regime's escalating repression, including its barbaric execution of protesters, with whole sections of people now calling for an end to the regime. These are our people in Iran, everyone with a heart. Everyone who believes in freedom and justice should recognize what a great thing it is when people, especially women who have been held down so brutally in Iran, rise up against their oppressors. Everyone has a responsibility to support them. As the Communist Party of Iran, Marxist-Leninist Maoist wrote, "What is unfolding with grandeur and magnificence in the four corners of Iran is not an Iranian event. It is a cry for liberation from oppressed humanity." It is very important that some prominent artists and voices of conscience in the US have spoken out. And it is beautiful to see our comrades in Colombia responding to the Iranians' call to take up the cry of revolution from Iran as your own. But much more of this is needed. Our Colombian comrades are saying, your struggle is our struggle. That's internationalism. But what are most Americans doing? Once again, staying in their own lane. This is bullshit and it needs to change now. Look, given the history, which most people don't even know, of how the US has oppressed Iran, sponsoring a CIA coup in 1953, followed by decades of torture and torment under the Shah, then backing Iraq in a bloody war with Iran in the 1980s, and continuing to threaten and punish the Iranian people with sanctions, those of us living in the US have a special responsibility to stand with the Iranian people and to oppose all moves by the US to intervene and hijack the people's struggle for its own imperialist interests. Lastly, it's extremely important that there is an organization in Iran which has taken up the new communism developed by Bob Avakian and is fighting to lead this uprising to the only solution which can actually emancipate women and end the oppression and exploitation that the masses face, a real revolution. So it's very important for people around the world to learn about and spread the word about the CPI-MLM. Again, internationalism. The whole world comes first, not America first. This is at the core of the new communism brought forward by Bob Avakian. This is what you get every week on the RNL Show. Stay tuned for much more on Season 4.
All right, Sunsara, that brings us to the conclusion of this first show of the new season. We began early this morning out at the freeway here in Los Angeles.
Freeway overpass downtown LA, yeah.
Yeah, and now it is dark outside and late at night. But we have completed the first episode, and I hope we've given all of you a picture of the content of this show and what we're going to be bringing to you all year long. And we've got a lot of exciting ideas, including our new lovely set. And, I'm just really looking forward to this season where we put revolution on the map.
And we want to call on you, everybody watching today for the first time or our returning viewers, spread this show. Getting people to tune in and watch the interviews that we featured a piece of from Bob Avakian that we did last season and we'll be running this season, and spreading this show, which comes out every Thursday and is available all week long, spreading it across this country to people who hate the way this world is, who hunger for change, who wonder if there's any other way that things could be. This is a critical part of putting revolution on the map. So we are putting you on a mission with us as we launch this season.
Yeah, and before we close out, if you have a question that was provoked by today's show, write us. A regular feature of our show this year is going to be answering your questions. So send them in to therevcoms@gmail.com.
Or leave them in the comments below.
All right. So we want to say good night. But before we do, we'll remind you that we're on. The show begins every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to close out the show in concert with the last segment done by Rafael Kadaris on Internationalism with a little bit of the song from the revolutionary band Outer National.
Look down at our planet from the heavens above. See it as it is, see it as it is. No borders or banks, no walls or tanks. No nations, no nations.